Good morning, episode number 64 of Daily Global Insights. Namaskar, Sree Chityalaji. It is the 29th of December. Welcome to PGurus channel. And today we are going to hit the ground running. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I'm sure you are all eager to know what has been happening with the stimulus bill and as well as the Gallup poll findings that Trump is the most popular person. There's a lot of data behind that we are going to share. This is a very objective look at why he has got that. And before we proceed, please do watch this program in its entirety. And also, if you like our channel, please do click the like button. And if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar and good morning to all on, 2 days prior to the end of 2020. I think everybody would like to see the end of 2020 and move on to 2021. So good morning and looking forward to the next half an hour or so.
Sir, let's start with what happened yesterday. All that drama about Mitch McConnell. First, he turns down the House offer, and then after a few minutes or a few hours, there's a rethink, and then he resubmits it. Slightly better, kinder, gentler version. But if you look at some of the media reporting, it almost looks like this new proposal of Mitch McConnell is sort of like a guaranteed to fail for the $2,000 per person effort. What are your thoughts on it, sir?
Well, I think that there's a political drama that is being played out. It's like, when you have these moments of opportunity, that's when you exert your influence and pressure. Otherwise, you are a great, good citizen, obedient and compliant with rules of engagement. So the House, everybody, wakes up and says, rah, 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 we got to pass the $2,000 bill. The two Senate candidates contesting the Georgia election say, we got to pass it because, the president is saying it, the people are saying it. Really, the economy needs it because the COVID has taken a bit longer. So everybody. So Mr. McConnell says, no, no, no. You all can pass the bill. We're not going to support the bill. So the House passes the bill, but then it has got two riders. Then it had a couple of riders stuck on it, and then those riders got eliminated in some way, which is the Article 230 to be either eliminated or watered down significantly. And then, lo and behold, Nancy Pelosi concedes ground for conducting a hearing on the election fraud. So then GOP senators, quite a few of them line up and say, yeah, we got to support this bill. We got to support the bill. So more and more Republican senators come online. And still, Mitch McConnell says no. And then around 7:30 p.m. New York time, East Coast time, we get the flashing press release. Mitch McConnell says the $2,000 bill stimulus will be approved. I'm standing by. It will be presented for up or down vote in the Senate. We are willing to forego Article 230. We will also consider and look at the defense bill. And we are prepared to hold the hearings on the election findings. So therefore, and we also will look at the wasteful expenditure. So all president's conditions, which was the rationale for the veto, is now accepted by Mr. Mitch McConnell. So what then happens if, let's say, Mitch gets his votes in the Senate? Do they go back? Because if they say Article 230 is gone, okay, Nancy may say, good, that's gone. 2,000 is accepted, that's good. So that's done. And by the way, there will be an election stuff. Okay, that's good. Then he says, I'm going to pull these pork bellies down. So then what happens? That's the question that remains uppermost. I do not believe that they will say, okay, let it go and we'll figure this and fight this on another day. Now, nobody wants to accept it because the reason is everybody here is a President Trump hater by and large, but the survey doesn't say so. At least when you listen to the media here, you hear the story that, everybody hates. So President, ineffectively, has got his way. $2,000, he got it increased, right? Number one. Number two, he put wasteful expenditure. The wasteful expenditure is watered down, right? Will be watered down. He got Article 230. He got, therefore, the defense bill as well through with the Article 230 condition being met. And he basically went on to say, it's not $600, it's $2,000, and more is coming to address the small business. So it's a very fascinating way as to how a president has played a very proactive role in managing the House and Senate and bringing it almost close to what he had proposed as his terms. As I said, the US media and generally around the world, they won't accept because they have this visceral hatred for President Trump. But he has achieved the goal.
Well, did the Gallup poll finding have something to do with Mitch McConnell's change of mind? Let's find out. So, what we thought, viewers, we would do was let us try and objectively analyze the last 4 years of Trump and compare it with his predecessor, Barack Obama, and see how the two fared. Although it is unfair because Trump got only 4 years, whereas Barack Obama got 8 years, but that's okay. We are going to give him a little bit of handicap. What Sridharji and I have done is put together an objective view as to how Trump's candidacy has changed the lives of average Americans and perhaps the whole world also, because if you remember, Trump was instrumental in having many West Asian countries. Sir, I'm using the word West Asia. West Asian countries open normalize relations with Israel. This is something that nobody has done before. Also, Trump kept America out of any new wars. So these are some of the highlights that nobody can deny. Be that as it may, now let us plunge right into an objective analysis of why Trump got the most popular status or the vote for most popular in the
So
Gallup
while
poll.
you bring up the screen, sir, so I'll say here are the three key headlines.
Yes.
Gallup poll says that President Trump is voted the most what you call popular American of the year for 2020, with 18% of the respondents. Until last year, he tied with President Obama, I think at 16% or so. So this year, this is the Americans voting for past presidents and important leaders and so on. I think you will probably see a chart which shows what percentage of votes. I don't see. I'm looking at Sree Iyer. You probably are looking at the screens with cameras. So I
Yes,
think
yes.
that you will probably see that. The second thing important is that they conducted a poll amongst the Republicans. 72% of the Republican voters basically said that Trump should be the role model for GOP, the way he has transformed the party. And that simply implies that he has broadened the masses. And once upon a time, Republican Party was at least construed as, of a specific, white denomination only for affluent business people. It was a private social club, etc., etc. He has completely defied that specific logic. And so, in other words, so you find that the 72% of the people, Republican voters, saying that he is the right role model, especially around what he has done in 2020. There is also the results also suggest there's a very strong support for President Trump to continue even today, notwithstanding the fact he's almost reached the end of the he's almost at December 31st. So there's probably a strong indication that also gives a pep up, which is to say contest, because the elections, there is a lot of questions around the elections in terms of the validity and the transparency of the elections. 56% of the Americans, that's Democrats, Republicans, blacks, whites, Hispanics, everybody you can think of, has voted that their life is much better in 2020 relative to where they were in 2016. And he stands tall amongst that relative to any of the incumbents before. That is the 1990, 1984, 1992, 2004, and 2012. So now we'll get to the charts as to what has led to this magical outcome that Trump has been able to accomplish.
So I have the first chart put up, the supersized stimulus that had to be passed to tide the country and in fact the world over on the COVID crisis. So I have the first chart up on the supersized stimulus, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. So I think as Sree Iyerji pointed out, this is the first barometer. What is the significant criteria that differentiates? You will see that there are three graphs. One is October, COVID-19. The second one is the global financial crisis, which is when Mr. Obama took over. And then there was the tech bubble, right? When you compare these three charts, you will see a huge spike in year one, which is equal to the 10%. 10%. This chart was constructed in September. We will construct another chart in January once the second stimulus comes in. 10% of the GDP. And then, as you can see, it tapers down as you move towards year five, is just smoothing, which is purely based on the forecast of the GDP numbers, and which is to say, effectively, in year two, once we cross year two, almost from year three onwards, we are below the 0% below the zero line, which is effectively the fiscal stimulus will be taken out. That is reflective of the second stimulus that was induced right now, and whether that kicks in the last 2 days or whether that kicks in the first quarter of or the January of the thing, we will factor in. But that kicker that happened, as opposed to the other two stimuluses, you can see they have tapered over the 3 years. In our view, that basically has delayed the momentum of the recovery. And so this is a very key differentiator where a strategic decision was taken in terms of putting a significant amount of stimulus into the economy. Now, it's not just simply putting the stimulus. Now we go to the next chart. They were targeted and directed across the various sectors of the economy, right?
It's up, sir.
It's up. So you will find that you have direct payments to people. That's number one. Number two, you have a PPP program that was introduced to ignite the small business, which is the chunk of the industry where people are employed. Then the third, they did not leave the corporate sector. So they put money into the corporate sector as well. Close to $500 billion was put into the corporate sector. I'm just looking at that because I don't have the benefit of your chart, so I'm taking a look to make sure my numbers are correct. Then they put $377 billion into the small business sector. Government also employs a significant amount of people. They put 17% into government and they put 9% into public services. So the sectors which are consumptive but which are also employers of the economy, they directed the stimulus and applied it so that the impact can be directly felt. Three questions are asked in hindsight today in 2020, right at the end of when we are in November, December. Three questions are asked. Why is this economy looking so good relative to a pandemic type of a situation when we have between 3 to 6 months of shutdown, people remote working from home? The next chart, which is the retail sales chart, will give you that number.
I have it up, sir.
Okay, the retail chart. The retail chart tells you that relative to the past two economies or past two economic or outliers, which is the GFC, we saw in 6 months from March to September, the retail sales come back to normalcy. Actually, we can show one more chart, which we'll show later, which is to show the retail sales is slightly above 2019, which is close to about $700 billion of retail sales has occurred during this particular period. So therefore, the question is, has the targeted impact, the targeted stimulus worked in this economy? It did. The numbers show that. When you compare this to the past two bubbles, one took almost 34 months, another one took 16 months to recover. Now, if you go back to the first chart, which I don't want you to go back, but think of it, you will find the stimulus, which was kind of spread over 3-4 years, has delayed the recovery relative to this big induction that occurred. It was pandemic. It was understood to be pandemic, and infusion was done. Yes, sir.
So what you are essentially saying is this method that Steve Mnuchin has used has given the country the best chance at having a V-shaped recovery.
Correct. And the V shape is visible in the chart. You see, the way this is why I use the phrase United States is an integrated architecture of a balance sheet, which is you take, you either take a debt to buy an asset or you take a debt to basically incur an expense. So here the debt was taken, which is 2.1 trillion. The expense side of the balance sheet showed 4.14 trillion or 4.2 trillion for 2020. They added, that means these costs were absorbed in the balance sheet as an expense, which means they incurred the expenditure by giving money to people, right? When you give something away, that means you're giving money, they incurred. That is reflected in the economic outcome, because when I look at the revenue side, right, when you look at the revenue side as well, the projection was $3.7 billion of revenue for you. There's another chart. I'm sorry, I'm reading it from my mind. $3.7 trillion was the revenue, which got down to about 3.5. In a major contracted economy, you were able to recover almost 80% or 85, 90% of your taxes, basically because the corporate employment worked, the SME employment worked, the payroll taxes, which is a significant part of the revenue, worked, and individual taxes worked in a pandemic situation with the expenses directly going towards generating the revenue. Sorry.
So for viewers who are trying to grasp all the numbers that Sridharji is putting out, I just want to give you a simplistic example. It's not the same as what he's saying, but I want you to understand that, many of us have used these handset pumps in India. You use these handset pumps, and this is something that draws water from underneath, like a bore. Bore has a motor, but in the past, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we used to have this thing called a handset pump. And you use a handset pump to pump water from underneath the ground. So sometimes what would happen is you keep on pumping, only air is coming out. So what you have to do is you have to actually pour some water into it to make sure that the air escapes and the pressure builds, and then you start pumping, and then the water starts coming out. So it is something like that is what had to be done for COVID. So how much water you put to make sure that the water that is trapped inside comes out, that is what has been attempted. I'm sorry to give you a very simplistic example, but that is in essence what the American economy has tried to do, and it seems to have done quite well. It's poised for growth, and I think Biden is probably going to harvest some of the fruit of the labor that was done by Trump. But that doesn't take away the fact that the common man's life has largely been, I wouldn't say undisturbed, because COVID is hanging over them as like a cloud, but at least in terms of fiscal lifestyle, things have been more or less okay, because once this second stimulus comes in, then over a 12-month period, people are going to get about 5 months of their wages, assuming they were out of work. So please continue.
No, great. Thank you. Thank you for that interjection, sir. So these charts are available, by the way. You have it would, if you go back to 2, 3, 4 sessions ago, you will find some the chart that I just mentioned. The numbers are available in that specific chart. So what's the next one that you look at? The next one that you look at is the unemployment numbers, right? So if you say the numbers are, is directed towards the corporate and the small business and the public services segments of the economy, what is the unemployment? We went from less than 4% unemployment to almost 15% unemployment, with close to about 6.9 or 6.7 million people losing jobs immediately as a result. President Trump at that point have said, please don't treat it as people losing jobs. These are not jobs lost. It's almost consider them as furloughs. Furlough simply implies that people are taking a smaller pay cut. They just go, they work to limited time, they come back in shifts, they may not work. Until the stimulus came in. Once the stimulus came in, the PPP program and the corporate program came in with caveats. It's not simply given to the business. If you take people, and we have covered this a little bit, if you take people and avail this program, you have to maintain 90% employment either till 2025 or in some instances even 2030. So he preserved the employment for all those industries which availed. all the businesses that availed the program, recognizing. And the states augmented it in two ways. There was also rental assistance that was given in the past, that is also being given in the next stimulus. So people did not have to either rental or mortgage. Those who were in, concessions were given on the mortgage side. Already 100 basis points shift in the interest rates. So you can see all segments of the economy, be it on the expense side of a consumer's balance sheet or on the revenue side of a consumer's balance sheet, which is effectively income, was managed so that people can assume almost they are living normal lives, notwithstanding that they had to deal with this big pandemic situation with no vaccine. He promised that there would be a vaccine by last quarter, and the vaccine as well has arrived. Now, the only question is, whether people would recognize all this was done. By the way, money was given to most of these large biotech pharma companies. $2 billion pre-order to Pfizer, something close to $1 billion to Moderna. They also had given money to a European, I don't remember the name of the institution, Europe and Israel. So they broadly spread this program of inducing capital into the biopharm, encouraging them to come up with the vaccines. Okay. Now, why people are not communicating this? They're not communicating this because there seems to be, I told you, this subjective bias. Even the traditional people who are supposed to look at this objectively are not looking at this objectively. And the last 2 points that I would like to say is that if there was no pandemic, this would be the president who, over a period of 4 years, has achieved greater than 3% growth in his entire tenure, relative to 8 years of Obama, which is he never crossed 2%, in terms of the GDP growth, right? So therefore, that is also the contraction, which was expected to be 6% by virtue of this pandemic, is now less than 3%, minus 2.4%. So we actually can go to the next chart. So we talked about the unemployment, how we brought the chart, just like a V-shaped retail sales. It's an inverted V by virtue of inverted V as far as the unemployment is concerned. We went to 14 point, we are now at 6.7%. Again, within the short span of 6 months, the unemployment is now around, roughly around 6.7%. Now, if we go to the next chart, which is what does the Fed say as the economic forecast, right? What does the Fed say as the economic forecast? We have shared in PGurus the chart, which is to say 2021 looks like a bumper year, which was Fed says it's 4.2% growth, whereas Goldman Sachs just 2 days ago predicted they expect it to be 5%. Now with this stimulus, with this incremental dollar value in checks that is going to all the taxpayers who are part of the economy, plus there is this unemployment, plus there is the child allowance, etc., there is room to believe that this would be a great year coming into 2021. And still, the other question that is asked is why there is no inflation. Inflation occurs when there is a wage rise. Here, there is no wage rise. The average wage that is given to a person by virtue of the substitution that has occurred is equal to the per capita of the nation, is equal to the per capita. So nobody suppose a couple is earning greater than $150,000. They're not entitled to getting this benefit, right? They would be able to calibrate themselves. So it was meant to address those segments of the economy who pay taxes, but who are impacted in a maximum manner. So this is the whole architecture of why you don't find inflation, because money was not added as a top-up to existing. There was no wage increases. So the substitution occurred through the process of stimulus, and that in turn helped the unemployment, also helped the sales, the retail sales to grow, which is the engine of the economy here.
Viewers, we just had a bit of a mix-up here. I went back to the right slide, but all the numbers that he mentioned are in the Fed projection slide. That's what we have got it up now. Chityalaji, I have one other slide that I want to show, which is the recovery from various market crashes that we have
Right,
had, right?
right,
So shall I
right.
go to that now?
Yes, yeah, please, please, please,
Here we go.
please, please. So,
Yeah, we have it that now.
okay, great. So the other parameter that one needs to look at is the recovery. The markets, markets and market sentiments are reflected by the charts. The S&P chart, which is how it performed. If you take a look at the S&P chart, looking at the any crash that has occurred, you find that the one that is the pandemic is the least in terms of the impact. And by the way, when we look at that, means the peak market down is around 29% relative to the others. Now, when you look at the 2020 performance, we are going to be at 15% or 15.6% or 14.7%, depending on yesterday, day before yesterday, 15.6%. Yesterday, the market went down, so we went to 14.9. So we will be in that 14.5 to 15% in 2020. We were 29% in 2019, right? So the markets again have performed quite well under the Trump kind of regime. So this is also another indication that the money, it's driven by three factors. The three factors are: one, the interest rates were kept at a manageable level and did not get ahead of. Normally, the interest rates get ahead of the curve, which chokes the consumers in two ways. One is the mortgages, and the second is the cost of borrowing, because everybody is reliant on credit cards or mortgages or auto loans, which basically powers the economy. So interest rates were kept low. Second, the inflation was contained. The inflation never went past the target of 2 to 2.5%. So the inflation was kept in check. And third is that there was support provided by the government to the various sectors of the economy. This is the subsidies battle that went on with China. I agree that in some periods the deficit went up in terms of the trade deficit. But overall, when you look at the economic drivers, you will find, be it on the inflation side, be it on the interest rate side, be it on the unemployment, we achieved the lowest unemployment, even going up to 3.5% before we dipped into this pandemic recession. That is reflected. The market sentiments reflect the people sentiments. Why those charts are important? That chart is important because, again, when President Trump speaks, look at your 401k balances, which is your retirement account. Look at your 401k balances. Your 401ks have done very well. Your 401ks have done very well. If you happen to be a smart guy and put all of your money in the five stocks, Apple,
The FANG.
Alphabet,
The
yeah,
FANG.
Apple, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, and Google, and then also at Tesla. In Tesla, if you invested in 1 year, you made significant amount of money. So therefore, even in that facet, you find that the performance is quite stellar by way of his 4 years of regime, especially the crisis management around the pandemic.
And let's now look at the stimulus breakdown one more time, because this is where things are now back. And if you look at this, you will see that there is one SPY, which is $55 billion and 6%, it says. And this is the weird stuff that nobody has been able to explain. And now this was done when the per capita allocation was going to be $600 per person. Now it is going to go from 600 to 2000. Sridharji, you want to take a guess at how this pie chart will change when the government has to accommodate the additional person per person money of $1,400?
Well, I personally believe that this $55 billion, there is a line item which is a little vague, is for $27 billion out of the $55 billion within that. You won't see that number here, but when you you see these numbers, when you have what I call as the rounding arithmetic, right? So you can calculate, okay, $280 billion for payroll for direct payments. $300 billion for small business PPP protection program, 50 billion dollars, $75 billion for rental assistance, 45 billion dollars for travel. That includes employment of $15 billion for travel, etc. Yeah, $82 billion for health services. You can basically, they are big line items. They want everybody to be visible that the core segments. Then suddenly you come to $900 billion. Nobody will tell. So we have to add. You remember that we said we were the people to add and basically tell, hey, you guys have got this. There's a problem here, right? The $55 billion is a problem, which prompted, the awareness prompted president to kind of stand up and say, I don't like this because this is not something I like. So this $55 billion has to be tackled. And you found that money going to a lot of people outside countries, right, including $1.2 billion to Tibet, $700 billion to Sudan.
700 million, sir. Million.
700 million going to Sudan, and so on. There's a whole line item of numbers. Plus, there is another line item which says about $27 billion. Some green program or something it is called, right? It's very vague. Only you have to search the literature to find out what these numbers are, right? So these numbers are not very clearly marked. So that's where he says we got to kind of, this is not acceptable. It is U.S. taxpayers' money that must go to the U.S. taxpayer in a period of austerity. So I think that's what we are beginning to see. I mean, the question that being asked is, what do I see this 55? I don't think this is going to be cannot be more than 2 to 3% or 1 or 2, maybe maximum 2% of the overall. It has to come down to something like, less than $10-15 billion. Some of these countries need support, especially Tibet, because of all the challenges that are. So Tibet has a very specific focus. It is one of the most oppressed kind of nations, which is struggling. And the Tibet bill has also been passed. And I think we talked about the Tibet bill. So you will see that they may not unilaterally cut, but they're not going to spend 6% of the budget. They will allocate some chunk of this money towards the incremental delta. By the way, just to kind of wrap this part, the checks for that direct payments checks, which constitutes that $280 billion, started to go yesterday, Tuesday. Direct payments and checks have started to go yesterday, as promised by Steve Mnuchin. So everybody will get their kind of money. Yes, there was a lot of cry that a segment of the unemployed people were deprived of the delay in this budget. Maybe by a week or 2 weeks they were delayed, but they're getting the money commencing last night.
So let's take a quick look at the United States elections. By the way, thank you very much for that comprehensive look at the reasons behind the popularity of Donald Trump. See, these are all people, individuals like you and I, who have been asked this question by Gallup, and then they have responded. So this is directly going to their lifestyle, their bottom line, their feeling of how they feel at the end of the year. So that's a good, analytical view of how this may have come about. So let's take a look at the US elections. Still, the January 6th has a lot of significance. Things are happening in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. Can you please quickly cover this, maybe a minute or so, then we can go to India?
Right. I think that the quick is that the GOP lawmakers in the Pennsylvania, they have come back and said these numbers don't seem to add up. Okay, we have now done the analysis, audit, etc., which we have said before, that the numbers don't add up. The Arizona people have stood up and said, hey, all rests on the shoulders of Mike Pence. We want Pence to intervene and use the separate electoral voters that we have sent rather than the electoral college, because now we find that there is a lot of invalidity in the elections. As far as Georgia also had some interesting issues, which is a sitting judge in 2 counties declined the ruling, which prompted the secretary to make a statement. Hey, this is very, very illegal. You cannot have, this is people changing their address in the middle of an election process. This is between November 3rd and January 6th. and saying I need to enroll in this new jurisdiction. They say that that is just not acceptable, and that is not the law. But the judge, the word that is used is the Obama judge. She also happens to be the sister of Stacey Abrams, who is the Democratic Party head, saying that no, the ruling stays and they are allowed, and you have to accept it. So therefore, you got some more controversy to come in Georgia. There's also a report that is coming out that basically says that many of the tech companies seems to have played an influential role in Biden's election, again, kind of raising concerns. So as far as the elections go, all these noises, which Democrats would argue is all the noise that you're making to nullify a genuine election, because President-elect Biden got 81 million votes. So therefore, it's one of the largest in the history, et cetera, et cetera. January 6th appears to be the point of confrontation where you have had both House and Republicans raising concerns, and they would be raising concerns. All you need is one House and one Republican for a debate to commence and determine how exactly the counting will be done. Electoral college or electoral votes would form the basis for the way forward.
Viewers, we are running a little bit extra time today because there was so much to cover. So now let's quickly take a look at India for a minute, sir, and then China for a minute, and then we can call it a program.
Yeah, okay. I think that there are three major headlines on India. First is, it looks like India has formally now come out, especially the head of the IAF, to basically say China seems to be fully deployed with surface-to-surface missiles, surface-to-air missiles, radars, deployment, full-fledged. And they also conducted their own kind of practice training in the Canadian Alps to do the winter warfare in the mountains. So it looks like they're fairly well organized and orchestrated. So India seems to be, seems to be cognizant and taken note and was not prepared to withdraw. So they held their positions. They're now going to have an exercise with the French, the Rafale exercise around the region or around the area. It's called as the Skyros exercise. It is being held in the Rajasthan region rather than around the border. So they would be doing very similar to the exercises, very similar to what Quad went through in the high seas. So that's the headline on the defense side. As far as the three specific areas India continues to kind of jump. One is the infrastructure. So one of the largest dedicated freight corridors has been inaugurated by India, and that's a 351 kilometers connecting almost to the east. You can see, I think we discussed it again, the entire focus is to actually amplify and elevate the eastern segment of the economy. It has two specific purposes. One, to look east strategy, and two is to develop that region to be a region which broadly covers the Himalayan kingdom, which is the Nepal, including Tibet, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, the eastern segment. So they're looking at that as a very important block to economically connect them so that you don't have asymmetric deprivation of infrastructure in the region. It's a great kind of a foresight to do that. And freight, basically, because that is goods moving, goods coming, encourages trade and also the commercial movement that can go along with it. The other area is UP, with Maharashtra having some political kind of conflicts and issues between the center, and the entire infrastructure seems to be working around at least 3 to 4 states. One is UP, which is getting a huge amount of infrastructure lift. Now they are building their roadways, which is one of the largest roadway network connections. What Purvanchal Highway and the Bundelkhand and the Gorakhpur, which is all interconnected as kind of highways, creating something close to about 600, 700, 800 kilometers of national highways. So there seems to be a very clear focus to build the GDP of Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh GDP is around $250 billion. Clearly, the goal is they have a master plan to build that as a 1 trillion economy. And similarly, I think the other states like Rajasthan, MP, Gujarat, you see a lot of infrastructure besides the northeastern side. The third reform which is taking place is around the mining sector. So the mining sector was one of the big sectors which was announced in the stimulus bill, which is the dilution so that you can bring. So this is the balance sheet model, asset, liability, income, and expenses. So how do you find the expenses? To find the expenses to create the stimulus, you need to create something on the asset side. So you're selling the assets rather than borrowing. You are borrowing, but you're also kind of selling some of the assets to fund. So you have that reform going simultaneously as well. Everybody knows India is ready for COVID and moving forward. So these are some of the positive, which is This is where all the visits are. Security, infrastructure, and trade is the pivotal format, both domestically as well as globally, what India is trying to pursue as an integrated policy.
Last one, sir, on China, all the developments that are happening on China. United States has roundly condemned the arrest of the citizen journalist, and Hong Kong, one of the lawmakers, is now being detained. China is again beginning to rattle sabers. What do you make of it, sir? And the last one is the status of the ships that are still waiting to dock, and that Dalian is still not happened. So kindly summarize it for us before we wrap up this program.
Yeah, we'll start with Dalian because there's quite a bit of Indian national staff or crew docked. Their stalemate continues. They have been sitting there for more than 6 months. I won't say they are, they are impacted because they're not able to come. Crew change is not, but they're getting medical supplies and anything that they need to do. But they're all docked for 6 months in a boat. So that impasse continues. India has reciprocated with equally good gesture, which is to say no Chinese national can board an Indian airplane or an airplane which they use to go via Europe and come into India. So they have, said basically, thank you, no thank you, and we don't need you here if you don't want to treat our citizens. Hong Kong, the journalist, as you rightly said, that has been unilaterally condemned. United States has imposed more sanctions now on companies, subsidiaries, any company dealing with the Chinese PLA. Well, Japan has now joined a partnership with the other RCEP members and saying they're going to push. If they want to be part of RCEP as they want to, then there should be free data-free flows and data-free access available to all, and they have to follow certain rules. China is not a country which follows rules. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to that specific confrontation. Then Chinese delegation went to Nepal to meet with Mr. Oli because the Communist Party appears to be splitting, and they seems to be the people, and they're very candid about it, people who unified so that their agenda, the communist agenda, can be propagated. That seems to have fallen and backfired, and Oli has refused to meet the delegation. And at least we are all, one is grateful that they have not fallen into the trap and not impacted the sovereignty. Otherwise, Nepal would have gone very similar to the Tibetan model, which is one day would be absorbed into as another province in China. So I think you can see across the globe, China seems to have problems. United States, India, which we touched on, Nepal, which we touched on, Asia, in Japan, Hong Kong. Of course, we talked yesterday when we presented the maps around Taiwan.
Thank you, sir. And viewers, do subscribe to our channel, and please also like our video. This helps us in increasing our subscription more, because then it gets shown to more people that are visiting YouTube. So please help us in this cause. We want to hit the 1 million mark as soon as possible. Sridharji, thank you very much for devoting precious time of yours in coming up with all this data. I hope viewers found it useful. And once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow with more news on what is happening on Nashville, what is happening in and around the United States. A lot of stuff to discuss, but today we don't have time for that, and plus things are still in a state of flux. Namaskar, and thank you very much.
Namaskar, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.